Hi everybody, it's Brandon. Here presenting my inquiry project. My project focuses on middle school students and the writing process. And as most of you know, I teach middle school language arts, 7th grade. And this was kind of birthed out of the um, our writing unit from last year. I noticed that some of my students struggled a lot with um, going through the writing process and doing the different process writing activities. So at a glance, what the presentation that I'm gonna discuss here, we'll take a look at some of my research questions, some primary data and some secondary data, and then some student samples from the writing process. My research questions, as you can see, the first one is how do students respond to a writing process? So we want to look at if students respond in a positive manner to a writing process, or do they respond in a manner that's not so positive. Secondly, if they do respond in a positive manner, what are students saying about the process? So, what do students think about the writing process? What are their thoughts? What engages students in the writing process? And what do they like about the process? Third question is if students respond in a not so positive manner, also, what are they saying about the process? Because we want to see what causes them to be so disconnected from the process and what causes them to not be engaged and what do they not like about the process. And last, what are some new and creative and innovative ways to assign traditional writing assignments? So first we need to define one of the words that we will hear a lot is process writing. Um, Process writing is an approach to writing that entails different phases of writing. Those are pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. As many of you know, that is the basic stages of writing process, and students are taught this from elementary school, middle school, and they work at high school and even in college. So this is kind of embedded in students' minds and in their writer's toolkit from early on as kindergarten in some areas, and as far as um, their undergraduate years in college. So here's a graphic that I used in my classroom. Um, and as you can see, you see the different phases: pre-writing, writing, responding, revising, editing, publishing, and sharing. And the reason why I use this graphic compared to others is because of the arrows. Um, as you can see, the arrows do not just flow in one direction; they go back and forth. This alludes to the idea that writing is not restricted. Writing is not recursive. That writing is fluid. So students and writers can move back and forth within the different phases of writing. Which for me, this idea wasn't pushed as much in my early years of as a writer. We kind of just went through. We're going to brainstorm, then we're going to write, then we're going to revise, then we're going to edit, and then we're going to publish. And for most of the time, responding, teacher or peer evaluation wasn't part of the process. So this is another reason why I like this graphic, because it actually incorporates teacher and peer conference, and it actually allows the student to self-evaluate. So the student becomes a critic of their own work, and they become reflective practitioners in that manner. So again, I like this graphic because of the way that the arrows flow, and it alludes to writing as a fluid process and not as a restrictive and recursive process. So my first data source came from teacher interviews. I want to see what teachers think um, about middle school teachers, more specifically about the writing process. So I interviewed teachers with those same questions in my research questions, and some of the responses were I have found the writing process to be very effective for middle school students. They need structure, and this actually walks them through that. Teachers saying that middle school students do need structure. If you've ever worked with middle school students, then you know structure is a top priority in a middle school. That middle school students have to have structure. So a writing process or process of writing allows for structure for middle school students. Um, I asked about how productive is the writing process for middle school students, and this teacher said productivity depends mainly on the student. Students can grasp the writing process quite easily. Some students can, and their essay just flows out. Some still have trouble getting their ideas on paper. The writing process is not structured enough for some students. Those students who need more clarification. For others, it is helpful to see the steps in the process. So going back to this one where it says the writing process is not structured enough for some students. Because writing is fluid, sometimes as middle school teachers, we have had to structure the process even more for students, specifying certain aspects of the process, making sure students actually go through these steps. So there is some structure needed for students who may learn at a different rate as their peers. And I feel as though we should also encourage students to use the technique that is most suitable for them to complete a writing task. So their student choice is involved. We're bringing student choice into the conversation. Students may not always include a structured pre-write, and this teacher agrees with students that the process helps with organization and direction. Uh, this is still a primary data source. This actually comes from student interviews, where I interviewed not my students, but I interviewed students from a different uh, 7th grade ELA class. So I asked them. I asked the students how do they respond to a writing process, and they say that the writing process provides me with opportunities to improve my writing and to make it my best work. So there we see the student actually going through the process, and especially in the revising part, because they said it improves my writing and I'm able to present my best work. So in this instance, students are really revising. So this student would really favor the revision process. Being able to choose my own topic allowed me to engage in the process more than it would have had I been assigned a topic. So they're going back to that research question, what engages students in the process? How do we engage students in the process? So allowing students to choose their own topic causes them to be more engaged. So once again, student choice is brought into the conversation. If research is involved, after I complete my research, I have everything I need to write my paper. I feel sort of like an expert. So again, allowing the students to get in and to research and become involved in their writing allows them to be more engaged with the writing. If students respond in a not so positive manner, what are they saying about the process? What causes them to not be engaged, and what do they not like about the process? Pre-writing is not all that important to me. I like to brainstorm and move right into the product. So those early stages of the process, pre-writing, brainstorming, some students find that that's not important because they like to brainstorm and go right into writing their paper. I don't think drafting is necessary. Drafting and pre-writing made the project longer and it took more time. I'm capable of coming up with ideas on my own. So let's see what scholars are saying about the writing process through the research that I've done. I did find an article and it was entitled Composing Processes and Writing Instruction at the Middle and Junior High School Level. And this author cites the Brown, Florent, and Hayes 1982 study that says writers, it's experienced and novice writers, do not proceed according to prescriptions of traditional text writing textbooks. That is, writers do not follow a linear plan involving discrete sets of pre-writing, writing, and writing activity. So that goes back to what I said earlier about writing being a fluid process. It doesn't necessarily follow a linear plan. That means that students will not just go from stage to stage to stage. Like that graphic said, students can move back and forth between the stages before they can advance to another stage. Another article that I found was the process and product of writing, implications, elementary classroom teachers. I know this article comes from elementary classrooms, but I still, after reading it, I still thought it was still fitting for middle school students. So in that article, it says writing should not be taught as such a linear process and rigid series of stages, but a recursive or fluid experience that allows students to move in and out of stages in interactive ways. So again, writing is not a linear process, meaning students are following a line across, but they're moving in and out of those stages. They're pre-writing, brainstorming, then going back if necessary. This article proposes that the writing process is beneficial for students. During the different stages, students are able to engage themselves in a process that requires collecting thoughts and ideas, transforming the thoughts and themes that they have on their papers from the writing process into sentences and paragraphs and full essays. Students become a critic of their own writing, and finally, students share their published product. Again, the publishing piece is very big for students. Out of all the processes, out of all the stages in writing, in my experiences, the publishing part has been the most rewarding and most useful, and students find that part most encouraging for them as writers. The publishing part is most encouraging. After they've criticized their own work, and after they've conferenced with the teacher and completed a self peer observation, getting to that publishing piece is the most rewarding. And this article also asserts that research shows that students who write through a process become more refined writers. They ask more questions, and they recapitulate on processes more precisely, meaning that students really use that process not only just in writing, but they may apply that process to different events. So here's some student samples that I've taken from. This one comes from a student in my class. This is a pre-writing. This is a graphic organizer that a student uses, and as you can see, the student this is their main topic, and these are their supporting paragraphs. So this particular assignment was talking about how inventions have influenced our lives. So this student in the pre-writing created a graphic organizer to organize their thoughts and to construct their essay. And here we have a draft of the essay that the student has written with teacher comments. It's very important. I've in my research, I also found that it's very important that teachers comment back on a student's writing as if they're having a conversation with the students. So in my experience, I've tried to do that. Like here on this comment, it says good, strong opening sentence. So I'm acting as if when I'm reviewing this, either at the end of the day during planning or at home at night, I'm acting as if the student is sitting right in front of me, and that the comments on the page is what I would say directly to the student. So for this project, what further questions do I have? One of those would be, how can middle school students engage themselves more with the writing process? Not just continuously going through the process, but how can they immerse themselves more into the process, getting down to the nitty gritty with the process, and actually moving through that process. And what tangible benefits can students receive for completing the process? For middle school students, rewarding is always a benefit. It always works to the benefit for the student and for the teacher. So what tangible benefits can students receive for completing the process, the writing process? For example, in the past we've done publishing parties, we've done read alouds, we've done open mic nights, and those things push students to actually take the process more serious and to complete the process.